It was a perfect Tampa morning on Bayshore Boulevard. Joggers were running along the waterfront. Families were pushing strollers on the wide sidewalk. The sun was shining on what locals call Tampa's most beautiful street. At exactly 11:45 a.m. on May 23, 2018, a Ford Mustang traveling over 100 miles per hour turned that peaceful scene into a nightmare. 24-year-old Jessica Reisinger Raubenold and her 1-year-old daughter Lilia were killed instantly when Cameron Herrin's car slammed into them during an illegal street race. But before we go deeper into this tragedy that divided the internet, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Are you in Tampa, somewhere else in Florida, or are you following this case from across the world? 3 years later, in a Hillsborough County courtroom, Cameron Herrin sat with what witnesses described as a confident demeanor as families wept around him. That confidence disappeared the moment Judge Christopher Nash announced his sentence. This story starts with 2 teenagers, 2 fast cars, and 47 seconds that changed everything.
This is Accused, where we break down the cases that divide us. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we dig into the evidence and connections that mainstream media leaves out. The Cameron Herrin case became more than just a tragic accident. It turned into a social media phenomenon with more than 23 million views, where millions of people defended a convicted killer because they thought he was attractive. Today, I'll show you the crash data that TikTok users never saw, the text messages that revealed Cameron's true mindset, and the victim impact statements that left a courtroom in tears. This is how a street race on Tampa's Bayshore Boulevard became a 24-year prison sentence that sparked international controversy.
Cameron Herrin was 18 years old when his life changed forever. He had just graduated from Tampa Catholic High School and came from what many would call a privileged background. His family lived in a nice Tampa neighborhood, and Cameron drove a 2018 Ford Mustang that wasn't just any car off the lot. This was a performance vehicle, the kind that teenage boys dream about owning. Cameron wasn't shy about showing off his car on social media either. His Instagram posts showed him posing with the Mustang, and friends said he loved the attention the car brought him.
Cameron wasn't racing alone that day. His friend John Barino, also 18, was driving a Nissan Altima. The two had been friends for years and shared a passion for fast cars and the adrenaline rush of street racing. Bayshore Boulevard had become their playground, along with dozens of other young drivers in Tampa. The beautiful waterfront road, with its long, straight stretches and light traffic during certain hours, seemed perfect for racing. But what these teenagers didn't think about was that Bayshore Boulevard was also perfect for families taking walks, joggers getting exercise, and mothers pushing strollers. On the morning of May 23, 2018, Cameron and John decided to race again. They had done this before without any problems, so this felt like just another day of fun. Cameron posted on social media earlier that week about his car and his plans. Friends later said he seemed excited about pushing the Mustang to its limits. What none of them knew was that across town, Jessica Reisinger Raubenold was planning a peaceful morning walk with her daughter Lilia along the same stretch of road.
The timeline of that morning shows how quickly everything went wrong. At 10:30 a.m., Cameron and John met up to plan their day. By 11 a.m., they were already on Bayshore Boulevard, testing their cars and getting a feel for traffic patterns. Witnesses later told police they saw both cars making practice runs, accelerating hard and then slowing down. At 11:30 a.m., Jessica arrived at Bayshore Boulevard with 21-month-old Lilia in her stroller. She had made this same walk dozens of times before. The wide sidewalk felt safe, and she loved showing Lilia the boats on the water. At 11:42 a.m., traffic cameras captured Cameron and John, positioning their cars for what would be their final race. Cameron was behind the wheel of his Mustang, and John was in his Altima. They lined up side by side, engines revving. 3 minutes later, their decision to race would destroy multiple families forever. What happened next was captured on multiple traffic cameras and witnessed by dozens of people who still have nightmares about what they saw. At exactly 11:45 a.m., Cameron and John launched their cars forward in a high-speed race down Bayshore Boulevard. Cameron was driving 102 miles per hour when he approached the intersection where Jessica was crossing with Lilia. The crash reconstruction team later determined that Cameron accelerated from about 30 miles per hour to over 100 miles per hour in less than 47 seconds. That's not gradual speeding up. That's a deliberate decision to go as fast as possible on a public road. Jessica saw the cars coming and tried to get out of the way, but there wasn't enough time. The Mustang hit Jessica and Lilia with devastating force. Jessica died at the scene, and her body showed that even in her final seconds, she was trying to protect her daughter. Lilia was rushed to Tampa General Hospital in critical condition, but the injuries were too severe. She died the next day on May 24, 2018. 2 lives were gone because 2 teenagers wanted to see who had the faster car. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but there was nothing they could do for Jessica. Bystanders who witnessed the crash were traumatized. Some called 911 screaming. Others tried to help, but quickly realized how serious the injuries were. Cameron and John both stopped after the crash, and police arrested them at the scene. Cameron later told investigators he didn't realize how fast he was going, but the evidence told a different story. Here's a question for you. You're 18 years old, and your friend wants to race cars on a busy road. You know it's illegal and dangerous, but you've done it before without problems. Do you race anyway and hope nothing happens? Do you say no and risk your friend calling you scared? Or do you suggest finding an empty parking lot or legal racing track instead? Think about your choice as we see how Cameron's decision led to consequences he never imagined. The Tampa Police Department treated this case like the serious crime it was. They assembled a full crash reconstruction team and spent weeks gathering evidence. They analyzed the traffic camera footage frame by frame to determine exact speeds. They measured skid marks and studied the damage to both vehicles. They interviewed 37 witnesses who saw the race or the crash. They also examined both drivers' phones and social media accounts to understand their mindset before the crash. What investigators found was troubling. Cameron's phone showed multiple videos of him driving at high speeds in the weeks before the crash. His social media posts bragged about his car's performance. Text messages with friends discussed street racing locations and times. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was part of a pattern of reckless driving that Cameron had been doing for months. John Barano's phone showed similar evidence, but his cooperation with investigators helped prosecutors understand exactly what happened that morning. Both Cameron and John were charged with vehicular homicide and illegal racing. The grand jury process took several months, but in early 2019, both men were formally indicted. Cameron's family hired expensive lawyers who immediately began working on a defense strategy. Their argument was simple. Cameron was young, had no criminal history, and never intended to hurt anyone. They called it a tragic accident, not a crime deserving decades in prison. But something unexpected happened while Cameron's case moved through the legal system. Social media users, particularly on TikTok, began creating videos defending Cameron. These videos gained more than 23 million views, with comments offering support for Cameron. Many users said his actions were just a mistake. Some even called him cute and argued he was too young and attractive to spend his life in prison. The hashtag campaigns spread internationally, with supporters from countries around the world demanding Cameron's release. Cameron's TikTok account gained over 2 million followers, where fans claimed his innocence and created romantic videos about him. This was unprecedented, a convicted killer becoming a social media heartthrob while victims' families grieved. The viral support showed how powerful social media could be, but it also showed how disconnected online activism could become from legal reality. While millions were making TikTok videos defending Cameron, Jessica's husband David was preparing victim impact statements for court. The contrast between social media sympathy and courtroom facts became clear during Cameron's legal proceedings. Cameron pleaded guilty to vehicular homicide and unlawful racing on a highway in December 2020. This guilty plea meant he admitted to the crimes and accepted responsibility for killing Jessica and Lilia. But his behavior in court told a different story about his level of remorse. Court observers noted that Cameron often appeared relaxed during hearings. He was seen talking casually with his lawyers and even smiling at times. Family members of the victims found this behavior troubling, especially given the seriousness of the charges he had pleaded guilty to. Cameron's demeanor suggested someone who believed his youth and appearance would protect him from serious consequences. On April 8, 2021, Cameron Herrin appeared before Judge Christopher Nash for sentencing. This was the moment that would determine whether Cameron would serve a few years or decades in prison. The courtroom was packed with family members from both sides, media representatives, and curious observers who had followed the case online. Cameron sat at the defense table wearing a suit, and witnesses later said he appeared confident, almost casual, about what was about to happen. The victim impact statements came first. David Raubenolt, Jessica's husband and Lilia's father, spoke directly to Cameron about losing his entire family in one moment. He described Jessica as a loving wife who was excited about being a mother. He talked about Lilia's first words and how she was just learning to walk when her life was cut short. David's testimony was so emotional that several jurors and court staff were seen crying, but camera footage from the courtroom showed Cameron's expression remained largely unchanged during these statements. Judge Nash acknowledged the difficulty of the case, saying, "There's really nothing that the court can do that's capable of fixing the harm that has been caused to the victims in this case." But he also had to balance Cameron's age and lack of criminal history against the severity of his crimes. The prosecution asked for 30 years in prison, arguing that Cameron made a conscious choice to race at deadly speeds on a road where families walked every day. Then came the moment that broke the internet and changed Cameron's life forever. Judge Nash looked directly at Cameron and announced his sentence, 24 years in state prison. The court sentenced him to 9 years for Jessica's death and 15 years for Lilia's death, to be served consecutively. Court observers said Cameron's confident expression vanished instantly. His face went pale, and he appeared to struggle to understand what he had just heard. His family members began crying, and his mother had to be supported by relatives to prevent her from collapsing. The 24-year sentence meant Cameron would be over 40 years old when released from prison. His dreams of college, career, and starting a family were gone. The teenager who thought his youth would protect him suddenly realized that killing 2 people had consequences that would last decades. Video of Cameron's reaction went viral on social media, but this time the comments were different. Many of his previous supporters began to understand the seriousness of what he had done. Cameron's legal team immediately filed appeals, arguing that 24 years was too harsh for someone so young with no previous criminal record. His friend John Barano, who was also racing that day, received only 6 years in prison after cooperating with prosecutors and pleading guilty earlier in the process. Cameron's supporters pointed to this difference as evidence that his sentence was unfair, but prosecutors explained that Cameron was the one driving the car that killed Jessica and Lilia, making him more responsible for their deaths. The appeals court upheld Cameron's 24-year sentence in May 2022, finding that Judge Nash had acted appropriately given the evidence and the harm caused. Cameron's lawyers tried again to reduce his sentence, but another judge refused in November 2022. The legal system had spoken clearly. Killing 2 innocent people while street racing deserved serious punishment, regardless of the killer's age or appearance. Today, Cameron Herrin is serving his sentence in a Florida state prison. He has been incarcerated for over 3 years and has more than 20 years remaining. His TikTok supporters have largely moved on to other viral trends. But David Robinault continues advocating for safer streets in Tampa. The city has made improvements to Bayshore Boulevard, including better lighting and more police patrols, but street racing continues to be a problem throughout Florida. Jessica and Lilia are remembered at a memorial site on Bayshore Boulevard, where flowers and toys are still left by visitors. Jessica was 24 years old and had her whole life ahead of her as a new mother. Lilia was just 21 months old and was learning to say new words every day. Neither of them got the chance to see what their lives could have become because two teenagers decided that racing cars was more important than public safety. The Herrin case shows us how social media can distort justice and how good looks can make people forget about victims. Millions of people saw an attractive young man and decided he deserved sympathy, but a judge saw the evidence and decided he deserved accountability. Tomorrow on Accused, we'll examine another case where appearance fooled everyone until the truth came out. If this deep dive showed you evidence you hadn't seen before, subscribe to Accused because we always dig deeper than the headlines. Jessica wanted to watch her daughter grow up. Lilia wanted to learn to run on that same sidewalk where she died. They never got that chance because someone else decided that 47 seconds of speed was worth more than 2 precious lives. Justice isn't about who looks innocent. It's about who takes responsibility for their choices.